Today, and our guest this morning is someone who worked with Dr. Williams, Mrs. Marilyn Gordon. You would remember her most as a Minister of Sport, but she started off in Dr. Williams' cabinet in 1974, she said. Was it 76?
78.
78. 1978 as the Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Education. She was Minister in the Ministry of Finance, Junior Minister in the Ministry of Industry and Commerce, then a Minister of National Transportation, Minister of Sport, and for those who remember, a national hockey goalkeeper. Good morning, Mrs. Gordon. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Sharmain. It's nice to be here. Good morning.
It is good. It is really good to have you here. The vision thing. When folks speak of independence, folks speak of Republican status, folks speak of Trinidad and Tobago where it is now, it started somewhere. It started just before the Federation. It started back in 56 with the Premier. It started with a man who was a renowned scholar and had the opportunity to stay in the United States but chose not to. Came back here, went right opposite Woodford Square, had thousands of lectures, and when it got so big, he went over to Woodford Square. The point I'm making is he had the vision thing to move the country forward. This is the 34th commemoration of his passing. Speak to me from what you knew of Dr. Williams and what we are looking at now. Is any part of that vision post his exit? Because, to speak of while he was here would be almost pointless. But since he has gone on, has the nation learned from this, and are we moving in some cohesive way to realize that vision? Is there still an understanding of what that vision was?
Sometimes I wonder, and I get really upset because the vision, the picture is there. It was of a place where every creed and race could find an equal place, where we would not discriminate against one another simply because of our status, our standing in the world, and standing in the society, where the smallest man could have a voice, where the country would move forward because we were such a talented, multi-talented country among people. I say myself that for the number of talented and varied talented people we have per square mile in this country, we probably have the most talented country in the world, with the opportunity to change the face of the world. And sadly, today I look on and I'm really, really upset, because that vision that Dr. Williams brought to the country, he used education as the base for moving us forward. His position was that if we could educate people, all people, along the lines that we are all Trinidadians and Tobagonians and nothing else. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's famous, no mother India, no mother Africa, no mother Syria, only mother Trinidad and Tobago. And if we had stayed that course, then what we are seeing happening in the society today, I'm afraid, would not have happened. The implementing that vision was his dream. And certainly in our time, we were working day and night to make it happen. So, for example, when I went into the government, one of my jobs as an ex-teacher was to explain the education system as he saw it to people. So you went around the country and you were explaining this whole junior, senior comprehensive system designed to find what talent you have, what you were good at. So it didn't have to be a bright child.
Academically driven it was not, yes.
Yeah. But you would find a space, whether you were talented with your hands, whatever, your craft. And so by the late 70s, we had developed a system in education where we were giving assistance to Australia to set up their vocational training programs that we had already set up in Trinidad and Tobago, right? And we were producing young people who came out of school with a skill, right? Some skill that they could contribute to the country. And by the mid-70s, we were able to boast that in this country, we had universal primary education, which was free. We were the only developing country in the Commonwealth who could make that statement. And I made that statement in 1977 in Ghana. And everybody else was looking at us and saying, how were you doing it? And we were doing it because that was the commitment, that was the vision, that we will bring our people together. We will make sure that no little girl in Barakpur or in Toku would stay home and become a slave, because that's basically what they were.
Underscored by the fact that he said repeatedly the future of the nation is in the school bag.
In the school bags, right? But those little girls and boys got to school and got the advantage of being able to read and write and understand. And it's sad to see that we are now talking about an education system where a large percentage of people are coming right through the system and coming out without being able to read and write. That is madness.
And he coined our national watchwords: discipline, tolerance, and production. And if we take note, we know that almost no longer in our vocabulary. We don't have them reinforced. They may be on a wall and on a poster in a school, but some schools, and it's not exactly reinforced. Mr. Bishop?
No, 1962. I'm just looking at part of what he said. I was actually reading about it last. The first responsibility that devolves upon us is the protection and promotion of our democracy. Democracy means much more than the right to vote and one vote for every man and every woman of a prescribed age. Instead, democracy means recognition of the rights of others. And I think that is very, very important every time I think of entering into an independent state. Every time I remember that period when there was a feeling of a Trinidadian, what they call it now, Trinidadian and Trinbagonian. Yeah. And it is one thing to hear people coin it, but when you hear what obtains on the street, it's disturbing, because it's almost like Christ talking about those who say in the Our Father prayer. You just say it because you say it, but really there is nothing further inside of it.
Yeah.
And that I find quite disturbing. But you speak of what's coming out of the schools now. Where in your mind the system started failing? Where and when? Sort of. And I'm not looking to ascribe blame. I'm just trying to understand why such a potent and relevant vision for the nation went awry.
I trace it back to the late 80s, early 90s, when the education plan, we had one education plan that ended in 80, right? So it was 69, I think, to 80. And then, in fact, I was one of the people who had the job to develop the new education plan. And we did a 5-year plan as opposed to a 15-year plan. And then after that, there were no other plans. No other plans were developed for education. And what the base, the foundation that was laid then was to a large extent ignored, because people were concerned about all kinds of things that didn't have anything to do with education. In fact, I get a sense that they really didn't want an educated population. You know, and we need to go back. We need to go back to those fundamentals if we are to survive as a country, and if our people are to grow and develop as they can.
I remember Dr. Williamson, and he was said many times he was against anyone. He held a very, very dim view of anyone looking to get out of the system anything for themselves. He was all about, it was about service. And it seems now, consistent with what you're saying, that the vision thing is non-existent. It seems now that governance is all about getting in there, getting my way, turning over the ways of others, and getting what I can get out of that. Am I wrong in what I'm seeing?
That's what I see as well. That's what I see, and that is what hurts so much. Because, although I must say, I've met some younger people now coming into the politics who are back into that service mode.
Lest that folks misunderstood. This is also true of all the political combatants.
No. I'm not doubting that. Okay. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that I've seen some young because I have now started being asked to, within our own organization, to come and lecture to our young people about the PNM, about our vision, about our constitution, about the documents that inform and must inform your policy. Because a lot of people came through and they weren't exposed to that. And therefore, you can't defend what you don't know. Right? So that within our organization, I'm seeing that happening. And I'm seeing lots of particularly young women coming forward who are not concerned about what they can get, but are more concerned about what they can give. And those are the people that we need to be encouraging. Because when Dr. Williams was looking for people, he actually said to his people, to his cabinet members in 1976, go and find young professional women to come and work. Okay? That's how I got into the politics.
The inclusion did not have a label at that time. It was just embrace all.
There
young
was a label.
Professional women.
And there was a label that we spoke about earlier this week, Mrs. Gordon, when she was the rising feminist movement at the time, labeled you all the kitchen cabinet. And she gave me a very interesting story about why the kitchen was important to Dr. Williams, that it was a place, you said, in his home where the major decisions were made, the kitchen table.
Yes, around the kitchen table.
And which is why I want to take it there, because you would have worked with him. You saw his vision, you would have worked with him, the man that he was, which made him a good leader. Yes, there were mistakes, and we don't have the time to analyze his politics as it has been analyzed over and again for 34 years.
Yeah.
But the man that he was, that made him a good leader, that made him stand out and compared with what is being offered to us today.
Yeah. The kitchen cabinet, his kitchen cabinet, was designed for us, the women who were new and young in the politics, no matter our ages, right? But and maybe didn't understand how you manipulate people and manipulate situations and so on and so forth. We need to get this done, and this is how we're going to do it, and then you're going to run into the barriers. So the kitchen cabinet was designed to ensure that woman's voice and that woman's influence would be brought to bear on the decisions. So when he talked about education, it was not just going to school. He worked out that the children will not benefit from education if they were hungry, if they couldn't get to school at all, because there was no transport, they couldn't afford to pay whatever was the rate of it, right? If they were not healthy, okay? So built into that, and the responsibility initially of the kitchen cabinet was to develop those services, right? So we went from a situation where the voluntary organizations were doing school meals, breakfast shared, the coterie. There was a group in Barrackpore, very few small groups of women who were providing meals, and our business was to expand that. But when we were expanding it, it was not only to provide meals, it was the kind of meal that you had to provide. We needed to use local input so that the farmers got involved in the process, right? So you developed recipes and meals that will use local inputs, knowing that when the kids get accustomed to that kind of thing, they're going to go home and take the message, right? Just as you develop the bus service so that kids could come and get a bus. And I mean, we had situations where the buses didn't run as they should have, or the bus somebody up at head office, wherever, didn't realize that when the bus left Cedars and was coming down, it would be filled long before it get to Granville, so the children in Granville will not be able to get to school. Good? But a lot of people would write to Dr. Williams every day, and they wrote in to say that we had this problem. I was called, I was told, deal with this. And I went down to Granville to find out what was the problem. I would put on additional buses. So it meant that you made sure that you spread the thing properly and that everybody could benefit.
It is a question of a follow-through. The voice you're hearing is that Minister Marilyn Gordon. It's great to have you here this morning. We are looking at 34 years since the passing of Dr. Williams. And from what you mentioned a moment ago, I'm encouraged that you say you were seeing young folks who were entering with a sense of purpose, a dedication to country. How much derailed is the Williams train that had Trinidad and Tobago as its target? How far derailed is that? Or do you hold the optimism that these new young people you see coming in can, in fact, put Trinidad and Tobago sort of like Williams back on track?
I am very optimistic that these youngsters, having come through the education system, even though it was, manipulated for some time and went off a little bit, of course. But they are now very anxious to get back because they've seen what we did. They have seen how we have progressed. They have grasped all the opportunities that have been made available to them, and there are many more opportunities now. And now they want to get the country back to a place where they can live the kind of life that we were looking forward to.
Are you seeing them operating beyond the ethnic divide, beyond this separation? Are you seeing the young people that you're seeing them from all stripes of the society coming in to do this? Is that what you're seeing? Then that's encouraging.
Yes, that is the fascinating thing about it. And I keep telling people the Eric Williams education system is still working, because that was part of it. Once the young people, whatever their background, grew up together and understood each other, then that dividing line is going to be reached.
I am hoping that, and I'm going to be as optimistic as you are, that in fact we will see the putting back on the rails Trinidad and Tobago. In the area of concern to a lot of folks, myself included, is that the new lessons that are being passed on to younger folks is one of get in there, get yours, and close the door. And Dr. Williams saw some of that, and he made a comment, I've noticed a growing polarization in the country in respect of the scramble for jobs or promotion and the determination of these on racial grounds. I just don't have it in me to associate with practices of the sort. And when you look back at that, I feel for some reason or the other, the independent speech from Dr. Williams is something should be a must-read in all our schools.
I would make them read it once a week myself until they learn it.
What else? We speak about his vision for education, which is the base for thing. What else? Because he had a vision for health, he had a vision for Trinidad and Tobago. What else?
Culture.
For culture, yes. And can you address those? And as Bishop asked, at what point was it derailed?
Well, let's take culture. All right, because that was the other key element in the... You remember the growth of the best village. Let us bring our folk together. Part of the problem that you had with all that you were doing was the recalcitrant minority who had a vision different, who wanted to maintain their own little cabal. God, that's a bad word. But
as bad as recalcitrant maternal. Yeah. They had their own culture. They had their own culture.
Yeah. But who resisted some of that, right? But what you're finding now, if you look at what has happened to the Best Village, they're coming.
Yes.
And everything is coming together. Even our classical singers are now going to our folk, and you have that. So it is developing. What I fear is that we're not developing it fast enough.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Because there is no reason why reggae is international and our music isn't. There is no good reason, except that we keep fighting one another instead of understanding that if we came together and we could move forward and we could change the world, basically.
Mm.
And I would like to see within the education system, because that's where it's got to start, within the education system, that movement to ensure that people go back to equal space, equal opportunity, fairness. I mean, you know, some of the stories we're hearing about exams and exam results and so on, they're not possible. Statistically, some of the exam results we're getting are not possible.
Mm-hmm.
All right? And so you have to address all of that. Because the vision that Dr. Williams had for this country cannot be allowed to die because it was so all-embracing. It made a lot of us, all of us, and our age group, and even the younger, some younger ones. And I think we are better off for it. And I think it is something that I want my grandchildren to embrace. And it's not difficult to do. It needs commitment. And what we know about the vision that Dr. Williams had was his commitment, and the commitment other people around him had to have to move forward.
And that's a commitment to nation, and a commitment to Trinidad and Tobago, above party lines, and that's where he stood out.
It has been a pleasure meeting you after having been around when you were in office, and seeing that you're willing to bring forward, because at the end of the day, you know, there are no winners. I think when people get locked into their party winners, they're losing or failing to see the nation losers.
Yeah,
we have to get to the point where we get past the parties and understand that we will have differences, because differences is what, you know, it inspires us to move on, and because we are individuals, we think differently. But as when I remember when the argument was made about teaching Hindi in school, he said, "Well, I'm not teaching Swahili in school either." At some point, there is Mother Trinidad, and that's where the focus has to be. It's been really great having you this morning. It's wonderful to see you.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much. We continue Inside Brunch on 107.7.